All right, so I'd like to give a little context for my talk today. And Mary Teresa, she mentioned hearing the voice. I was just checking in. How many of you regularly, routinely have a relationship with your higher self? Raise your hand. And so what that means for us is that we can either hear a voice, or we can have a sense or a feeling or an intuition, or otherwise be moved by a dimension of ourself that's connected to it all. And so we can have a very reliable partner in our life if we just simply recognize that we possess that capacity, and that's inherently something that is a part of our nature, but we lose access to that when we become so distracted by what's happening in conditions and circumstances outside of us. So it's been my custom every time it's my turn to speak, if I'm not delivering an assignment, such as speaking on a chapter in a book study, or otherwise, you need to talk about this, then it's up to me to kind of open myself to, yes, I'm in one of those relationships too. So it's my custom to open myself, to allow life to kind of tell me what is really bubbling up that I should be speaking into. And so this week, unbeknownst, I mean, something that I would not choose to do, is not my nature, but yet it's indicative of how the voice or the presence works for me. I got a very clear message that my talk was to be on the topic of the beloved community. How many of you are familiar with the term, the beloved community? It's connected to the work of Dr. Martin Luther King. And so for me, it was something that was a surprise to me, and so I had to ask this dimension of myself, okay, well, what's up with this? You know, if I'm to speak about this, how does it connect, how is it relevant to who I am and what my what is seeking to live itself through me? And so the voice again was very clear, and it said that beloved community is the heart of Mission-Centric Ministry. Okay, and so it's also been my experience that as I am in the role of being a conduit for Spirit in my work in the larger New Thought movement, championing a different paradigm in ministry that's more resilient in these times, that's not tethered to the pastor-flock ministry practice, where the minister, where the well-being of the ministry rises and falls depending upon who the minister is, but rather connected to, rather dependent upon the fulfillment of purpose in the lives of the people, which is what I describe as mission-centric ministry, where together our effort is to create an organizational practice around the felt experience of having our lives transformed, and in turn wanting to make a difference in our world. That's what we're here to create as a spiritual community and an organizational practice that helps us to fulfill that purpose. And yet, while that organizationally is a different paradigm than a minister-centric ministry practice that is built around theological context of the organization and also the vision and impulse of the minister, instead, we need to understand that the organizational structure around which we create the fulfillment of purpose in people's lives can only exist if we have the heart, the beloved community that enables us to create a container for our transformative experience. Because independent of really being able to be in the effort of transforming our lives and making a difference, we can't do that by ourselves. And indeed, in the context of a more eclectic religious context, the second coming isn't an individual, it's the Sangha. It's the community. It's the beloved community. That's what brings us into the integrity of our spiritual nature and our humanity in order to be able to be present to the tremendous challenges of the world. We have to draw upon a strength and a capacity that isn't of the world. And so that's what's seeking to come through now, and I'm interested to hear about it. How about you? Because I don't have a clue necessarily other than what I'm seeing is what is our next level of potential. And so as we look to this next year, this next phase of our unfolding, and really think of it in the context of building the infrastructure for the heart to hold us in our journey of transformation, what might that look like? So I mentioned that the beloved community has been linked to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s work and mission. But actually, the truth is that Josiah Royce was the founder of the Fellowship for Reconciliation, or the Reconciliation Fellowship, who coined the term originally, and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was a member of the Reconciliation Fellowship. And so after this individual passed in 1915, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King took on the mantle of bringing that principle forward. Of course, we all know that the work of Dr. Martin Luther King has to do with, making the world a better place, especially for those who are in the experience of injustice or racism or other dimensions of human intolerance. Anyway, the point is that as we look to his work and his example and his ministry and his life and teachings, we can see that what his effort was to create the reality of God's kingdom on earth. And in some ways, the beloved community was his effort to replicate that dimension of what is possible when we lead with our hearts, when we come together, when we make love and compassion and diversity, inclusiveness, and care and kindness the foundation of how we define ourselves, that we can create something together that can transcend the ills of the world. And should that not be what religions move us towards? Well, obviously it's not moving us towards that. And so we have to look towards our spiritual heritage, our roots, in really discovering a sense of what is meant by this sense that we can co-create what God has intended us to live in as our natural state, and that is the beloved community. So this gentleman, Reverend Dr. Jim Lockhart, is a personal friend and colleague of Jane and me and mine, and Jane and me and mine? Okay, one of those. Anyway, he's also a Q coach. He lives in France right now, and he is a Centers for Spiritual Living minister. He's a kind of counterpart to me in their movement. However, his voice is really about developing the heart of our capacity to really be in this world and really make a difference. And so as he writes about his own effort to really build or create the beloved community in the New Thought movement, in the context of recognizing that our New Thought movement, like all other congregational ministries, is in decline, if we're to turn this tide, we have to show up in the presence of what's happening in this world and embrace it in a way that enables us to really build a sense of capacity and empowerment around how we can be together in a way that sustains us in our own individual lives and dealing with whatever is happening in the world. So to kind of explain or give a sense of what the beloved community can constitute for us, Jim Lockhart writes, "The beloved community is a collection of individuals who are learning how to love themselves, one another, and the universe. It includes creating the experience of belonging and experiencing the wonders of who we are, individually and collectively. It is a place where purpose and passion meet, where we practice being the person we desire to be, and support others in the effort in doing so." So think about that for a moment. We are here to bring ourselves into the experience of what can happen when we absolutely love ourselves unconditionally. And we create an environment in which we are challenged to demonstrate, to live into that expression of being that is the very change that we seek in our world, and that we support each other in that effort. And so towards that aim, therefore, Reverend Jim Lockhart describes a consciousness what it means to possess the consciousness of becoming the beloved community. And I want to look at what those implications are. And as I share what he suggests are the elements or the consciousness of the beloved community, I'm wanting us to consider how we already are. So for those of you who have been with us for a long time, this goes to what is the legacy that you are helping to create. And for those of you who are just joining us or who've just early on the journey with us, then you can kind of see what we stand for and what we espouse and have a sense of whether or not this is a good fit for you. So let's just run through this quickly. And so it begins with a consciousness of compassion. And so the beloved community's foundation is the consciousness of compassion. And I think that you can acknowledge that that's what you hear from the lectern up here, from the ministers and our speakers, is that we're espousing love and compassion, generosity, acceptance, kindness, forgiveness, the kinds of things that move us through our heart and into those places that are difficult for our minds or our thoughts to go. And then there's a consciousness of love and connection, of really developing those bonds that transcend the outer experiences of other and differences. Then there's the consciousness of radical self-knowledge. What that means is that we are trying to educate ourselves with respect to how our attention and awareness works, how we make meaning, and why we believe the things that we believe. Those are just as important as the dogma that we might espouse, to understand how is it possible that I make what I have not enough? What's up with that? And so part of our spiritual path has to include a consciousness of self-awareness, of understanding that we create our own personal reality. And so that's another great thing that we're already doing. That's an element of what it means to become the beloved community. And then there's a consciousness of healing. The foundation of unity in our New Thought movement is Myrtle Fillmore's healing. And subsequent to that, Charles Fillmore's healing. And Silent Unity is a prayer and healing center, the very first telephone ministry on the planet, the very first youth We Wisdom radio broadcasts on the planet too. And so we have a consciousness, a legacy of healing as being our foundation, a consciousness of evolution and emergence. We recognize that these tumultuous times, the disruptions that are happening in the world, aren't against us, but rather function as either the hospicing of that which is needing to decay and fall away, or midwifing that which needs to be brought forth. And what you hear in the Islands of Sanity is all about equipping us to be welcoming the disruption, welcoming the energies that move us into the awkwardness of having to figure things out or allow Spirit to reveal a greater good to us. But the point is that we don't settle for how things are, because we know that emergence and evolution is a part of what is driving and bringing forth this new paradigm of reality, this new sense of interbeing and oneness and connection. Then there's the consciousness of pioneering. I mean, what we're about as Unity Spiritual Center is pioneering a whole new paradigm of ministry. There's a handful of New Thought churches that are in the process of transitioning out of minister-centric ministry into mission-centric ministry. And in order to do that, we have to have a pioneering spirit. We can't use the example of necessarily the big mega churches as being evidence of how to do ministry right, because those folks are having struggles as well. Then there's the consciousness of mutual support, recognizing that we're all in this together, that we cannot make the journey independent all by ourselves. We're not independent contractors, but we're beholden to the sense that we need each other, and indeed, in a sense, we have a kind of bodhisattva consciousness that we really can't make the journey unless everybody is on that path, or is at least making the progress if that's their path. Then there's the consciousness of contribution. And when we think about contribution as time, treasure, and talent, and all the things that we have to do in order to make this experience that we're having, not just on Sunday, but throughout the week, and all the ways in which we interact independently of the building itself, but yet it is done in the spirit of community, in the spirit of making a difference in people's lives. That is something that is alive in our ministry right now. And then there's the consciousness of possibility, that we work directly with the field of infinite possibilities. We know that the quantum field is just as real as the doors or anything in the outer. We know how to work with the unmanifest, the implicate order. We can connect up to a dimension of ourself and vibrationally align with the greater good and draw that into our life. This is not woo-woo. This is the science of quantum spirituality. This is something that we all have the capacity to do, and with folks like Ken and others who are teaching the principles of possibility thinking, moving out of our yesterday self, we're truly actualizing this dimension of our capability. Then there's the consciousness of vision. And Jane has deemed this, what have we deemed this?
2020 is the year.
Oh, 2020 is the year of the vision. Oh, how cool is that? And when we think about vision, it's about knowing that there has to be something that stretches us into doing something that on the level in which we're being stretched is impossible, but on the level of what is needed and necessary, it's inevitable. And that is, in part, co-creating a world that works for everyone. I mean, can you see how it's not finished until we would trade places with anyone? And the fact that we can't means that we have yet to fully inhabit the vision of what's possible. And so to be called by these different consciousnesses to bring forth the beloved community helps us kind of see what's at stake. And then finally, there is the consciousness of resiliency. Recognizing that the journey is not without struggle or effort, but the effort and struggle is not against us. It equips us. It stretches us. It brings us into a capacity that we have yet to discover. Only in the context of being able to kind of reach beyond our yesterday self do we discover that. And so the obstacles to the beloved community, building the beloved community, relate to our ability to create coherence and come together to create cultural tipping points so that we work to practice acquiring a skill or a capacity, and then when sufficient of us are able to arrive at that a level of expansion, then there's a tipping point. And the organization can't go back. And then we begin to attract others who are also at that level. And so the first thing that has to be overcome in the context of unity or New Thought congregations is the sense of that we're like herding cats. Have you ever heard of that expression before? So, you know, we don't mind that description of us. We're like herding cats. You know, we're all kind of autonomous beings. But the challenge is that when it comes to creating organizational coherence and community, a sense of we're all in this together, it's hard if we're all into kind of all of us doing our own things independent of each other. And so there's an aspect of what we need to kind of manufacture that it goes against our nature sometimes, is to join in and be a part of something that we can experience us being all together at. You understand what I'm trying to say? Okay. And we haven't been very good at creating that yet. How can we kind of overcome these obstacles and create a way in which we can feel more connected to each other and have it be more natural for us to want to create collective experiences so that we can practice these principles of the beloved community. The second thing is a phenomenon associated with our times and trends that we're facing. Part of the decline of congregational ministry is the aging out of the older generations and the burden it places upon the younger folks. And so in addition to that, the trends are there's a movement towards convenience as opposed to connection. So what that means is that people aren't motivated to engage connection as a part of community as their first inclination. They would rather have the convenience of connecting virtually before they actually are in a physical relationship. And so we have to overcome that. And part of the overcoming of that is to align with the very technology that is causing the trend to be problematic. And so as we align with those trends, it means that we have to get our own app, so to speak. So all the folks can find out everything that's going on, and they don't have to go onto our website or they don't have to look anything up. It's just all there in their hand. So anyway, so this is a challenge that we're in the process of overcoming. All right, then the author, Jim, talks about an obstacle. The big major obstacle to building the beloved community is our own human nature. And so he writes, we come together as imperfect, actualized beings. Can you imagine such a thing? We come together as imperfect, actualized beings regarding the expression of our potential. Then we try to grow spiritually in the company of others who mirror our imperfections back to us. So here's the challenge, and that is part of what is in the way of developing the beloved community is the part of us that believes that someone or something is against us. And therefore, we have to have something or someone the matter with us. And if we don't have systems to really address that dynamic, to have us begin to really recognize that, no, we're creating our own sense of separation, that we're creating our own sense of not enough, our own sense of inadequacy or unworthiness, those are things that we have taken on, and yet unresolved, they push us away from really experiencing the dimension of ourself that is tied to the beloved community, and instead we're needy, or we have to have things be a certain way, or we're focused on control, or we're a victim. The point is that unless we as a community embrace this dimension of ourself and work towards its healing and integration, then we're still living in the disconnect. And so as we turn to our spiritual teachings to resolve these issues, the difference between unity and New Thought with respect to other traditional congregational approaches is that we're not steeped in our theology or religion. We're able to exercise our teachings from those contexts that keep us living in as if what's out there is a reflection of our worth, and instead be able to use the teachings of spiritual masters in a way that helps us do this deeper shadow work. And so, for instance, we can look at the teachings of Jesus as we take his teaching out of the Christian dogma and place it into the question, how does his teaching help us create the beloved community? And then begin to see the spiritual practice that helps us work with those parts of ourselves that aren't engaged in the beloved community yet. And so, for instance, when Jesus said, I'll share, for instance, a teaching that you'll find in the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 42 and 43, and I'll share from the King James Version, the version that Jesus used. Okay, he didn't use the King James Version. No. All right. So he said, love your enemies. Bless those that curse you. Do good to those that hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, so you may be called children of your Father which is in heaven. So if this was a religious teaching, how could there be any war? This is not a religious teaching because the religions aren't following this. This is a teaching for our heart. Gandhi was once asked what he thought about Christianity. And he said, I think we should try it. So from an outside looking in, we have the teachings that can extricate ourselves, but we have to apply them. So to love our enemy, whatever is in front of us that causes us to want to push away or have to have things be a certain way, is something that is a mirror unto our own disconnect. And so working with understanding the difficulty in doing this integration work, we need community to support us in that effort, because all by ourselves it's too easy for us to mitigate ourselves with a bag of chips or an ice cream sandwich or both. All right, so let me get to get this wrapped up here. So Dr. Martin Luther King said, our goal is to create the beloved community, to build the beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our soul as well as a quantitative change in our lives. Think about that. The qualitative change in our soul means that we can no longer have a casual relationship with that part of ourself that is our spiritual identity, that is our higher self, that is the voice. We can no longer have a casual relationship with that aspect of ourself and hope to thrive in this world. We have to cultivate that dimension of ourself, because it must lead to some quantitative change in the outer. In other words, we actually have to break the habit of being that person we were yesterday in order to own the person that needs to show up, that can hold the space for the beloved community to emerge. And this is precisely what the Islands of Sanity is struggling with, to help us identify this struggle between the qualitative and the quantitative changes that both our soul and our body-mind need to make.